When you think of Peru, you probably think of Machu Picchu or the Andes. But most of the country lies deep in the Amazon basin. In this episode, I'm chatting with one of the most well-travelled and famous podcasters out there about what it's really like to explore the Peruvian Amazon and why it's far more accessible than you might think.
Welcome to the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Your host is founder of the Global Travel Planning website, Tracy Collins. Each week, Tracy is joined by expert guests as she takes you on a journey to destinations around the world, sharing travel inspiration, itinerary ideas, and practical tips to help you plan your next adventure. Join us as we explore everywhere from bustling cities to remote landscapes, uncover cultural treasures, and discover the best ways to make your travel dreams a reality.
Hi, and welcome to episode 89 of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Chris Christensen, the host of the long-running and hugely respected Amateur Traveller podcast. Now, Chris has travelled to more countries than most of us can count, so when he reached out with a list of possible topics to chat about, I was spoilt for choice. But I admit I was a little selfish with this one. I couldn't resist diving into his recent trip to the Peruvian Amazon. Now, with my own long-term plans to spend traveling through South America, Peru is firmly on my radar. And before this conversation, I realized I knew almost nothing about the Amazon region of the country. So Chris's experience turned out to be the perfect way to change that. Now, in this episode, we talk about what the Peruvian Amazon is really like, how Chris explored it on a small group river expedition, and why it challenged many of his expectations. We cover everything from wildlife encounters and daily life along the river to practical questions like packing, mobility, connectivity, and what kind of traveller this experience suits best. Now, if you've ever wondered whether the Amazon is too remote, too difficult, or too intimidating, this conversation may well change your mind. Yeah, so when I was deciding about what to chat with you, Chris, because you've been everywhere. You had a very exciting year in 2025, but I'm being a bit selfish because I chose the Peruvian Amazon. The reason for that is that next year I'm 60, as we were just kind of talking about, and I have promised myself at least 8 months exploring South America. So obviously that's going to include Peru.
Okay.
Now, I had no idea about the Peruvian Amazon. I read that and I went, okay, I know nothing. Literally, I know nothing. So this is a perfect opportunity for you to educate me and our listeners, if they also, like me, don't know very much about Peruvian Amazon. You know, we think about Peru for potentially different things, I reckon. So tell me, first of all, where is the Peruvian Amazon, Chris?
So it turns out for many of us, when we think of Peru, we think of the coast and we think of the Andes. The majority of Peru, and this came as a surprise to me, is on the east side of the Andes in the Amazonian basin. And so there's some two rivers that meet to form the Peruvian Amazon. Now, I think it loses the name again when it gets into Brazil and then gets it again. So it's a little complicated, but it's the Amazon River. It's one of the tributaries of the Brazilian Amazon. But it is part of Peru that is not as visited as much. There's a large city, a reasonably large city, Iquitos, which is the largest city that isn't connected by land to other parts of the world. Basically, there's one road that leads out of Iquitos that goes down to a port city, which we took, and we started our cruise from that port city. But otherwise, to get to Iquitos, you have to take a boat or you have to take a plane.
Yeah, when I was reading your article about it, and I was fascinated by the fact that you literally have to do the flying in, or you have to take the boat. So I'm going to ask, because I already know, so I'm kind of being a spoiler here, but I know you took a tour to do this. So let's just talk about kind of how what made you want to go and visit this part of Peru for a start off,
Sure.
And then how did you decide how to do the visiting part?
So it was one of those things where I had an opportunity because I'd worked with G Adventures before and I took a G Adventures tour here. Basically, they said, which one of all the tours that we run do you want to do? Which that alone can that can use up a whole weekend thinking about what do you want to do. And this one just stood out for me as a unique opportunity to see, especially what I thought I'll tell you what I thought going in, and I'll tell you what it was really like. I was thinking that it was going to be a very much wildlife centric trip, which it was and it wasn't at the same time. And it just seemed like a unique opportunity to do something adventurous. And also, so my wife does not travel with me all the time. She's still working full time. This is not a trip she would want to do. So I can do this, and there's no guilt involved in why isn't she coming? She would not come. Now, it turns out it wasn't as challenging as I thought it would be, and she probably would have been fine. And we'll talk more about that. But it was something that I did not think was on her wish list.
Okay, I was going to say, because I guess this is under the definition of adventurous travel.
Yeah, right. Well, and the odd thing is I was Peru for the first time, but I've still never been to Machu Picchu. That is on her list, and that would get me in trouble if I had done that tour. So that's one of the reasons that I chose it. But it is definitely adventurous travel, although not as challenging as I expected.
And we can go into that. I think we can kind of chat about kind of what your expectations were and how it actually turned out. But let's kind of go back to the beginning. So then you decided you flew into Lima. I guess that's where you started out the tour.
So where this particular tour starts is it starts and ends in Lima. And so you fly into Lima, you get a hotel. They have a hotel that you will meet at in Miraflores. The Radisson Red in Miraflores just happens to be their base hotel. It's the base actually for a number of different tours. We were also at the same hotel that the G Adventures group that was going to the same place but on a different boat was. And so it's just a popular place. Miraflores in Lima is a neighborhood that's very touristy, and so it's very comfortable. And so I think a lot of people use that as their home base, but it's not near the airport. It's about 50 minutes from the airport, depending on traffic, at least 50 minutes, and traffic is not great in Lima. It's congested. It's not dangerous or anything like that. It's just congested. But so we met there, did a welcome to Peru. Hello, everybody. Who are you? Introduction meeting, and then in the morning we met up, got on a bus, and went to the airport and flew to Iquitos. From there, drove down that 90-mile road, the only road that connects Iquitos, down to the port city there on the Amazon,
so
where the two rivers meet to form the Peruvian Amazon.
Okay, so you did that flight. So you didn't spend any time in Iquitos. It was just basically a transit through to then go and get the boat.
Correct.
Okay.
We actually went back to Iquitos. No, actually, we didn't. The only thing we did in Iquitos on the way out is we stopped in a wildlife sanctuary park that's called the Manatee Rescue Center, but they rescue all sorts of wildlife. And so on our way back to the airport, we stopped there to see the manatees and the monkeys and the parrots and all of the other wildlife that they often had taken from poachers or things like that. So it was actually an interesting chance to see some of the wildlife we did not see in the wild.
I was going to say, because you did see a lot of animals, which we'll talk about, and birds.
Wildlife being as they are.
It's not predictable, is it? That's the thing. You can't predict what you are going to see and when. That's always also the interesting thing. So just give us a little bit of an overview of the tour, because I love doing tours like this because they're organised for you. So it's great. And I know you mentioned Victor and Eric, your two tour guides, and we'll talk about them in a little bit as well.
Wonderful tour guides.
Yeah, sounded absolutely fantastic. And that takes a lot of the stress away, because right from the minute you're escorted and you've got that kind of safety net of having a tour around you. So,
and it's an Amazon cruise.
Yeah.
But that word is bringing up the wrong thing in most people's heads who are listening here, because I think the tour maxes out about 24, and that pretty much maxes out the boat. Maybe you could hold 30 total, but basically smaller boat, a little rustic from that point of view. I wouldn't say it was a luxury boat. My cabin leaned a bit. Apparently, it always did since they first built it. It was built there in the Amazon basin, but I thought a very comfortable boat and wonderful crew, Peruvian crew, obviously, and you are doing a cruise in the sense that you are waking up not in a different place than you went to sleep. They don't cruise at night because the Amazon changes a lot from day to day, from week to week, and from year to year. There are no charts for the Amazon. Apparently, they had uh, Navy pilots or Navy captains who tried to help out in the Amazon, and it drove them just completely crazy because there are not charts. You just know where you can and cannot go.
Okay, so it's experience then, experience based. I
Yeah,
guess whoever is
exactly.
navigating the boat, they know the area and they know the river.
Well, and I say that it changes from day to day. The one thing that I did not know going in that affected absolutely everything that we saw was that the Amazon changes level over the course of the year. And, that seems fairly normal. Rivers get deeper sometimes in the spring with the snow melt, and then they get lower at other times of the year, depending on where you are in the world and where they get rainfall and things like that. The Amazon, this Peruvian Amazon area, changes level about 45 feet between the high water time of the year and the low water time of the year. And so we were there kind of in the middle. And so we were there the I was there in the summer time, our time, so winter time, your time, or Peru, and the because obviously Southern Hemisphere, and the deal there is that in the winter time, there's a lot more people in the area than I expected too. That was the other surprise, that we were not in an area that was unpopulated. There were a lot of different villages with
Mm.
people in them. That wasn't like it was villages like huts. It was villages like rustic houses with not a lot of uh, things inside them in terms of furniture and things like that, up on stilts. And in the high water season, for instance, the people who are there can't fish
Okay.
effectively. And the reason why they can't fish effectively is we were in a reserve. We were in a nature reserve that is kind of the size of the country of Costa Rica. So large nature reserve here in Peru. I don't remember how it compares in terms of size to Costa Rica, but it's big.
Hmm.
In the high water season, 95% of it is underwater.
Wow, that's
And
crazy.
so everywhere we went in this kind of middle of
Yeah.
the in between the high water and the low water, we could see where the water had been up on the banks, which were 20 feet above us, up on the trees 10 feet up. And the houses were up on the banks and they were up 10 feet up on stilts, and they flooded last year. It was a particularly high water year. And so in the high water season, the fish hide in the trees.
Well, there's got
They're
plenty of
literally
space to do it, can't they?
in the
Spread out.
forest. And so it is not a good time for fishing. When we were there, all of that forest had drained. And so there was a great time for fishing. There were these little rivers and inlets that would go out from the big rivers into the jungle. And we would spend most of our days going up those little rivers and inlets in a small boat, basically 12 passengers in one boat, 12 passengers in another boat. And we would take these skiffs and we would go up these rivers and inlets into Blackwater lakes and other features. Blackwater Lake, a lake where there is so much foliage that has died that there is very little oxygen, and the lake is kind of the color of tea.
And you
Um,
swam in one of those, Chris, which
we did.
I
We swam in a lake, and we also fished for piranha, not in the same spot,
yeah,
but
that
you
wouldn't be a
knew in
good
the back
idea.
of your head that there are piranha in these waters, but not so much in a black water area. And that's where we swam, because most fish need to breathe oxygen, and they can't in that area. They die. Now there are lungfish in the area, which one of the reasons why they survive there and they are relatively extinct elsewhere in the world is these Blackwater regions where the lungfish can pop its head out. These are very long fish, like 6 feet long and longer, and so they can pop their heads out and they can breathe in that area while regular fish die, including the piranha. Fortunately for us,
It's actually a good job people can't see my face because I'm like, absolutely. And I know you kind of
they
said
have the same look on their face. That's okay.
the thing is, it's like I know, and you kind of say, so when you go, when you have adventures, you have travel, so you have to sometimes
Yeah,
put yourself out your comfort zone, and that was your kind
right.
of thing. You said you had that
Jumping into
trepidation
the
before you
water
jumped.
and swimming was out of my comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, I have to say hats off to you because that's one of my major fears is dark water, not seeing what's in the water. So I definitely couldn't. I was like, hats off to you, and especially when I read about those massive longfish, I was like, no, there's absolutely no chance. I'll maybe dangle a
Well,
foot in, but
those are not dangerous.
oh,
They're not going to eat you or anything like that. They eat other things. So
it's all right. I'm scared of
uh,
goldfish, Chris. So you're fine. It's like I wouldn't even if there's goldfish in there,
the
I wouldn't go.
piranha, there were actual piranha, and they what the guides told us is so in the movies, right? A piranha can strip a cow in a minute and things like that. Well, that actually is true. It's just only in areas where they're in such high concentrations, and the fish that they feed on normally are in low concentrations that they look for other prey.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we did fish for piranha, we were putting little pieces of meat on hooks and putting them in the water and very quickly getting piranhas, relatively small compared to as large as they get. But if you were in one of those areas where there were a real high concentration of piranha and there was a low concentration of fish, it would be very, very dangerous, and you wouldn't want to get out of a boat there.
No, for sure. No, I definitely wouldn't
But that's
anyway.
relatively rare, is
Okay.
our
Okay,
understanding.
that's good to know as well. So I'll
Yeah.
rewind a little bit because you mentioned about going off on these skiffs, and you said you'd have sort of
Yep.
12 in a boat, and there'd be two boats. So I'm guessing there's about 24 of you on this
Roughly.
adventure
Yeah.
cruise that you went on.
Exactly.
So give us a little bit of a kind of makeup of the group, and then we'll go into kind of chatting, I suppose, about kind of what once you it's always really nice when you meet people in a group because you know what it's like to
Yeah.
start with.
Yeah.
Everybody's a bit, hi, I'm here, I'm Tracy from wherever, whatever, and those first few days are a little bit awkward, and then after a couple of days, it's like you've known everybody forever, and you're great friends, and
It
it all
was a great
settles down.
group. It was a
Yeah,
great group.
yeah. So
There
tell
was
us where
one
they're
one
from.
person of the group who happened to be my roommate who was knew it wasn't going to be a luxury cruise, but really does luxury cruises, and I think let that ruin it for him, unfortunately. But we also had a woman who had survived was 80 years old, had survived an aortic aneurysm the year before, and told her family, anybody who wants to come with me, I'm going to the Amazon.
Wow.
And so she brought two of her daughters and two of her granddaughters with her. And so we had just she was fearless, just amazing. And it was a great group. We had people from Australia and England and US. There was one family who had booked directly with the ship that were Peruvian. They did not speak as much English, so we didn't have as much conversation with them, and they were only there for part of the trip. So this is a 1 week long trip, and it's about 5 days. 5 days, 5 nights on the river, as I recall. Maybe it's 5 days, 4 nights on the river, and then you have to get to and from.
Hi, travelers. I'm a friend of Tracy's, and I'm hosting a free online event that we think you'll love because it's all about helping you plan a trip to Europe or the UK in 2026. I'm excited to bring together over 30 travel experts to share their insider recommendations with you, and Tracy will, of course, be talking about the UK in our Gem Destinations of 2026 session. This virtual conference is called the DIY Trip Summit Europe Beyond the Crowds, and it will be free to attend January 13 to 15 for all who register. So be sure to use Tracy's link to sign up. Our experts are not only covering up-to-date destination advice, but also sharing practical, tried and tested trip planning ideas so that you come away with strategies and tools that will make a big difference in your own trips, whether you're just visiting the UK or really anywhere that you want to go. So I've curated 3 days worth of inspiring and actionable presentations for you so you can learn which apps are essential to have, where to find deals, what rules are changing for visitors, as well as inspiration and insights for all types of trips, including road trips and camper vanning, the Camino and other lesser-known pilgrimages, travel with limited mobility, multi-generational trips with kids or grandkids, food and wine adventures, using miles and points, and more. Again, you can grab your free ticket through Tracy's link to get access to 3 days of our expert-led presentations, plus a pop-up Facebook group and live Zoom calls, so you can get your travel questions answered by our experts and interact with fellow travelers. If you're planning a trip in 2026, you won't want to miss the DIY Trip Summit. We designed it to help independent travelers like you feel secure in your plans. So whether you're traveling solo or bringing the grandkids, you'll walk away knowing how to plan smarter, spend wiser, and uncover moments that make your Europe or UK trip unforgettable. We hope to see you there.
And I guess some of those people as well would have kind of booked this part of the trip into their longer trip, if that makes sense. So I'm guessing,
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that was even more true with the other cruise that I did in South America recently. But it was definitely true with this, that there were people. I was in and out for just this.
Yeah.
But that was probably more rare. I would say most people were doing at least 2-3 weeks, and they were also doing either more in the Amazon, or they were doing Machu Picchu, or they had done Bolivia, or whatever. But they had added it on to a longer trip. Yeah, it just depends on how much time and money you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I definitely have got it on my sets for next year. So talk me through a regular day. What was it like? Waking up on the boat. What did you do during the day? What was the kind of regular activities?
Yeah, so each day was a little different, but a typical day would be going out either just after breakfast or some days even before breakfast to see some of the wildlife as it was waking up. And so the wildlife you'd be looking for would be monkeys and sloths and then lots and lots of birds. I would say if you're not a birder, you will be, at least for those 5 days, because when there are macaws flying overhead or toucans or egrets, that is the wildlife that's always there. That's the wildlife that always shows up, right? You may or may not find monkeys today. You may or may not find sloths, although we did of multiple types of monkeys, including like the world's smallest primate. And the guides I asked the guides, I said, you couldn't have seen that from the boat. You must have heard it. And he said, yeah, he heard the cry. And then we got off on the shore and clambered up the muddy shore to get to where he thought he was. And we saw this, very, very tiny monkey. Basically, you could hold it in your hand.
Oh.
And so the guides were amazing in terms of their ability to spot and identify and such. And they were native. They had grown up here.
Yeah, and I know actually you do say that, when you listen to that kind of cacophony of the noise from the forest, to us, we kind of don't know. We're just hearing a lot of noise. But I love the quote that I am going to quote you here, where you say, to them it was a language that told them exactly where to look. And I love that. It's just
I like that.
Yeah. It's a great quote, Chris. Great, Chris. And I think, and that, having, as you say, you've got guides who grew up there, so they can interpret the language for you.
And they have seen this area change a lot as more Western culture has come in and more conveniences and things like that. But the people who live there, I mean, they dress like us. Their houses are more rustic, but they look like a house, and some of them had solar projects, and some of them had, a butterfly project that they're working on to make money. But it's relatively tough going in terms of making a living here because, so what happens is most of they're farming and fishing. Well, farming, you can only farm when the land is there, right?
Mm.
And so literally when the sandbanks uncover as the water drains, they have about 5 months to plant their crops. And then that will be their harvest. And so they plant their bananas and their rice and all of the different plants that they're growing. And it's wonderful, rich soil because it just washed down from the Andes. And it's renewed every year. But then basically they have 5 months before it covers back up again with water. So interesting place. And then they'll dry the yucca and the fish and salt it. And that's what they're going to be eating during the high water season. And we went into back to the port town Nantes to go to the market and to look around at that town as well. And when we're in the market, they were telling us, it's still the case that a lot of people there, the day they work is the day they eat. That they don't have they're doing more day labor in some sense. And if they're not one of the farmers, growing their crops and keeping their crops, then they're, buying what they can in the market with what they made today. So it's a tough place to make a living, but very verdant, very green, obviously, water everywhere. Even the terra firma, that other 5% that doesn't get inundated with the water, we did two different hikes where we went up into the jungle. So you said, what do you do during your day? Basically, you'll have, say, two different excursions a day, maybe three. So you might go out early in the morning and then you'd come back for lunch. There were a couple times we ate out on the boats if we did something longer, but generally you came back for lunch and then you might go out later in the afternoon. And there were a couple night cruises where we went out at night with lights, and we were listening for and watching for the caimans in the water, or the monkeys or the sloths or the birds or whatever in that. But I would say 2 to 3 outings a day, and then the rest of the time you're back on the boat. And those outings would be, I'd say, 2-3 hours. There's somewhat limitations. The restroom facilities, as you can imagine, if you're just going out wildlife hunting, are, if someone needs to stop, you have to find a tree.
Yeah.
So that part is relatively
basic.
rustic.
Basic rustic.
But we might be, we did at least 2 or 3 stops in villages where we went and saw what they were, what projects were going on in the village, met the villagers, talked about life there. We had a meeting with a shaman, a woman who is a shaman, which is unusual, who talked to us about practicing natural medicine and how she'd learned it from her grandfather. And she was required to basically go off into the jungle. I think it was for five years, and survive and learn, from her grandfather what various things could be used for what. So it was fascinating experience. And then, of course, when you're meeting with the locals, they'll also have some artwork that they have created out of the local materials that they want to sell you, that honestly, that a lot of us were interested in buying. There was a fair amount of shopping that went on, but it was all native stuff. It was all things that they had created. There were no crafts from the indigenous people of China available there.
I was going to say, that's a great way as well to support the local people when you're traveling this area.
And one of our visits, we had lunch in the village, and they do that to help support the village, obviously, but also they make sure that what you're drinking, for instance, has come from filtered water. There's some things that they need to do because the people there, they probably drink the water that we shouldn't, and have immunities that we don't. And so they have worked with the people to make sure that it's a safe meal, but it's a typical meal. This is the kind of things you can find there. And this is cooked in banana leaves, and this is cooked on the fire, and this is chicken, and this is, whatever, fish. And it was an interesting experience, but they were telling us, you could eat everything here. You can drink everything we're giving you, but we've
Yeah.
taken some care to make sure you can.
Yeah, no, that sounds good though. That sounds having the opportunity to do that as well, and try some of the local food. Did you enjoy it? Was
Yeah,
the
it was
food
good.
good?
We had both the food on the boat, as well as the local food experience that we did have, was enjoyable. But in fact, I think they did a wonderful job. They also just every time you walked into the dining room, there was some new decoration that was probably purchased from one of the local villages that was woven animals and things like that, from the local plants and things like that, was the kind of things they were using for decorating the dining room.
Oh,
So it
nice,
was great
nice.
fun.
So, obviously, you said this was about a week, this trip. So, did
Yeah,
you travel far? I'm just thinking like you were traveling during the day, but I'm sure you weren't going very fast in the boat. But
you don't go very fast and you don't go very far.
okay,
No, yeah, it basically is all taking place sort of in and around Nantes, which is that port town. And Nantes is just upriver from the Amazon. And so we went to the Peruvian Amazon. That was one of our first stops, was there. But then most of the rest of the time we're actually in between those two rivers that form the Amazon, there in that portion of that natural reserve.
okay. Just going to ask a practical question because it crossed my mind.
Yes.
So obviously, when you're purchasing some of these goods that the local people have made, cash, obviously.
Yes.
So where did you get the cash? Because this is the sort of practical question that people will be like. So where
Yeah,
did you
yeah,
get the
yeah.
cash from?
Yeah, we came in with the cash.
Okay, so you got that in Lima from an ATM.
And I think they were taking dollars, as I
Oh,
recall,
okay.
or
Okay.
potentially euros. But yeah, people had exchanged money, and mostly in Lima.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. It's like those little practical things that you go and you think, oh, so
Yeah,
so
yeah.
so how did Chris do that?
No, nobody broke out a credit card machine.
No, I didn't expect that. So I guess
Oh, there
connectivity.
were there were a couple places though they did have solar power, and so it's theoretically possible that next time you go down, they would bring out their credit card machine, but probably not.
So I guess this is also an adventure where you get a chance to unplug a bit because you're not going to have that connectivity
Oh,
that we
yeah.
have. We just used to 24/7.
Yeah, so they did have Wi-Fi on the boat. It was cellular powered. It wouldn't be something that I would have been uploading my photos or my videos or things like that, but it was sometimes enough that I was able to check email and not be completely out of touch. But yeah, you should plan on being mostly out of touch. We weren't quite as out of touch as I thought we would be. So that was one surprise. The other surprise is how much cultural interactions. I mean, it said it in the tour description, but I just wasn't expecting that many people there. It wasn't completely undiscovered. There were lots of people living in this neighborhood, basically, and had no clue what the impact of rivers getting lower and higher and lower, and what that would mean for them. And then the other thing I said is it wasn't as challenging. So I expected, I've read about Teddy Roosevelt who nearly died going up the Amazon, and I expected that there would be lots and lots of mosquitoes, and that it would be hot and humid, and both of those were true. In the evening, there were a lot of mosquitoes, just like that 1 hour right around dusk, which we just went inside. And there was a place in the back of the boat, in the stern of the boat, which was an enclosed room where the band from the crew members would play, and people would dance, and did that sometimes in the evenings, where the rest of that top deck was open. And it was lovely during the day. It was great in the morning. You'd get up in the morning, there'd be mist on the water, and pink dolphins jumping, and just amazing. And I wasn't expecting, when you were in the small boats and when you were in the big boat, most of the time there was a lovely breeze, and so even though you were in the jungle, it really wasn't that hot and sticky. Now, when you went for hikes, the two times we went for hikes, then I was so sweaty you could have hosed me off and I wouldn't have been any wetter. But we also hiked up in one place where they had there'd been a failed resort, and they still had these suspension bridges that the community was keeping up. And so you're hiking out and going with a local guide who's pointing out the tarantula or that this is a curare tree where they used to get the poison from for the poison darts, and all of the different trees along the way, including some of the hardwoods, which are very rare. They've forested a lot of the mahogany trees and things like that, but there's still some that are preserved here in this place, in this reserve. And so they would point those out along the way, and then you got further in and we got to go on these suspension bridges, and two at a time crossing so that you didn't put too much strength on them, and that was great fun. But that part was hot and sticky and with lots of bugs.
Yeah, so take plenty of water, I guess, is the tip for that one.
Yeah, I think the first one I did not take enough water. That was when I really used my long sleeve shirts too. So it sounds strange to go into the jungle and wear long sleeve shirts, but you're wearing them because of bugs.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that you kind of mentioned a tarantula, so that segues so nicely into me asking you all about the wildlife that you saw. So obviously you saw some things that I probably wouldn't be so keen on seeing, but then again, I still would want to see a tarantula, even though I'd be like, Yeah. Tell me what you saw. What were the highlights of the animals that you saw? Because I know you saw quite a lot.
Well, sloths are always amazing, and monkeys are always great. But again, the bird life, my favorite pictures that I took were of some of the birds. And I ended up doing a whole beginner's guide to bird watching in the Amazon post, just because I came back with photos that I just loved from some of the birds that we were seeing. The colorful macaws and the toucans and the raptors, so the fish hawk, for instance, and other hawks and vultures, and it was just very interesting. And then you get weird birds like the horned screamer that sounds like a car alarm.
I read that.
Or the one that sounds like a donkey, and I'm forgetting off the top of my head which one that was. But so the bird life was well, I shouldn't say surprisingly interesting, because I've been on African safari too, and it's amazing how much time you spend looking at birds there as well, because there's such variety and so interesting looking.
Well, I've just come back from Antarctica, Chris, and I got totally into I can now name 5 different types of penguin. I can tell you all about quite a number of the different birds that we saw, the different albatross, and then the skewers. It was just amazing. So actually, I didn't think that I was that interested in birds, but I came back with a far more of appreciation of it, I have to say, and interest. And the sloths, I mean, they just look so cute.
So some people want to keep sloths as pets, which they very much discourage. One of the reasons why people like them as pets: in the wild, a sloth will poop once a week. So it will climb down its tree so that it doesn't just drop its poop from the tree and go some distance away and poop and bury it and then climb back up its tree. And because sloths move so slowly, that takes about a week. And
that's funny.
So they are adorable. One of the kids did have a pet sloth in one of the villages we went to, and they had pet parakeets and things like that, which is more common in the villages. But what they certainly discourage is poachers coming in and trying to sell those as pets to us.
I can imagine that's a problem. So as well as some of the kind of cute, I know you saw pink dolphins as well, which sound amazing.
And grey dolphins also.
Which is fantastic. But I'm also kind of always a bit fascinated by the smaller insects as well. So I know that you saw, and this fascinated me, bullet ants. Because I don't like ants, right? I ever think I'm terrible with fish and I'm terrible at ants. But I was reading in your article about these bullet ants that eat the seed of the philodendron, and then it grows and it germinates inside the ant and kills it. How spectacular is nature? I mean, incredible. I had no idea. So I'm guessing, obviously, your guides are the people who are
of knowledge. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, so they're pointing out all these animals, these insects. I know you saw a snake as well that when you were going around. So you have a walk-in
insect. A snake, anaconda is the word you want to go for.
Yeah. So not a small one.
We were kind of stepping around it on the path, and then it jumped, and one of the young gals just ran right into me trying to get away from it. It quite startled us.
So I think you on this trip you get the kind of exposure to the culture of the Peruvian Amazon. You get an exposure to the wildlife in that area as well, and I guess those are I guess the two main themes that make up that kind of pivotal to this trip.
I think you also do get some appreciation for the tensions in development in this kind of areas. This is not an area where you were seeing a lot of the deforestation as you'd see in some parts of Brazil, but you do get a sense for you got people here trying to make a living, and you also have these natural resources, and there is a tension.
And I guess that there must be an impact from climate change as well. I'm guessing they'll be seeing that.
Probably, I would say I almost said that, but I don't know that we saw it quite as much here. As for instance, you were down in Antarctica, I was down in Patagonia, and there you'd absolutely see that sort of impact.
Okay, so central to it, the wildlife, central to it is the culture, and also kind of, I guess, going into a country that many of us have probably not been to before, or not been exposed to that kind of culture, or seeing that wildlife outside of potentially going to a zoo. So you come away, I guess, with an appreciation, as always when we travel, of a different area, different culture.
And you are going through Lima, so we did not take extra day to see Lima on this trip. But I went through Lima again on the way down to Chile and Patagonia, and we did get a chance to go down into the UNESCO World Heritage Site in the main downtown and see that and appreciate that as well. And you probably should, even though I didn't, just because you do have to get there, go through there. So it behooves you to see more if you can.
Oh yes, I'll definitely be stopping off in Lima for sure. But I'm very interested in doing this trip. So obviously, you mentioned you had a wide range of ages on this trip. So you call it adventurous, but not quite as kind of on that kind of more extreme side of adventurous. That you wouldn't describe it. They say it more gentle.
So the things where you need to be aware is, we had people from, I would say, mid-20s up to 80. The person who was 80, who, again, was fearless, her granddaughters and her daughters were helping her get in and out of the boats. The guides help everybody get in and out of the boats. That's, the thing they do. But also, you have to get up into some of these villages. And so we had a couple people on the cruise who were more overweight than me. And that was more difficult because if you think about it, so where we were, I said it was in the middle of the high and the low water. Some of the creeks we went up, were rivers today, the day we're going up them, and our guides were saying 2 weeks from now, we won't be able to go up this river. This river will be a creek. And so if you think about it, when you're going to a village, they have to rebuild whatever steps you're going up to at least every year. And so their ramshackle would be probably the right term. And so you're sometimes a little more concerned about, are you going to fall in the mud as you're trying to go up this, 20-foot bank or whatever, is a place where some of the people were definitely less comfortable if they had less mobility and, just that issue. So mobility is something that would be helpful to have. There's also no elevator on the boat. I mean, it's not a big boat. It's a 3-story boat. But you have to be able to do stairs, get in and out of a boat, and then more importantly, get up these, a little bit improvisational stairs and steps and things like that to get up into the villages or to get up to do the hike that you're going to do or whatever. So some people just did the boat excursions.
Okay.
They basically opted out after a while. They were like, I'm not comfortable doing those. I'm just going to do and there's so much of it that is just boat based that you could still have a decent trip, but I think you really ought to,
Hit the
do
gym
it when you have the mobility. Yeah,
yeah
hit the gym.
hit the gym
Yeah.
hit the gym.
But I am not in the. You've seen me. I'm more of an advertisement for a man who loves food than an athlete. So you don't need to be athletic by any shape or form. But it's good to have some mobility.
What about footwear? I'm just thinking about packing, because obviously if I'm going to be away for 8 months traveling around South America, I need to be really conscious about what I'm taking. But is there anything in particular you say, footwear wise or clothing? I know you mentioned obviously long sleeves.
Well, for the hikes, closed-toed shoes. But I think I did wear. I also brought my water shoes for sometimes that I didn't think I would need. It's like you're going to be in the boat the whole time. But for the hikes, closed-toed shoes didn't have to be hiking boots. I didn't bring my hiking boots.
Okay.
They did have rubber boots that we could occasionally borrow for when we were doing, like when I was doing the up in quote unquote terra firma, which I think I put in the article was more terra than firma.
You did.
It was very, very muddy. It was helpful to have boots on some of those trips, but they did provide those.
And your long-sleeved shirts for the mosquitoes, and don't forget your binoculars. I guess that's another one if you want.
Don't forget the binoculars. For photography, you really are. You can take pictures with your cell phone, but you're really going to, if you're a photographer, want to have a zoom lens. But remember, you're also shooting from a moving boat.
Yes. Well, you've got some remarkably good photos considering there, Chris.
Yes, but you know how you become twice as good a photographer?
You take twice as many
overnight.
Photos. Oh, I was going to say take twice.
You throw away half your photos before you show them to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in this case, I probably threw away 80% of the photos because I'm zoomed way out at a bird in flight.
Right.
And so, a lot of those photos didn't come out, and some of those photos are the best photos that I've ever taken. And it's the range.
Yeah.
But I was glad I had a camera with a good zoom lens. So I didn't bring my SLR camera.
Yeah.
I actually have a sub SLR with a built-in 60x analog zoom. So that was useful enough. But again, then you get into burst mode, you take a lot of pictures and you throw them away.
Yeah, choose which one you want. Absolutely.
Yeah,
well, I
exactly.
always end the podcast with the same question, whether it's the UK podcast or whether it's the Global Travel Plan podcast. So what is the one tip, Chris, you'd share with someone thinking about visiting the Peruvian Amazon for the first time?
It's easier than you think. That was the thing that I said on my podcast at the end, and I had somebody who wrote in who we decided she was there the same week that I was, and she was in that group in the Radisson Red in Lima in Miraflores going out on the Nat Geo one. So we were there at the same time, and she said, I had exactly the same impression. It was not as challenging as I thought it would be, and great fun. I thought it would. I certainly highly recommend it for the right person.
Well, it sounds exciting. I can't wait. I'll have to come on. I can't come on your podcast and talk about it because you've already talked about it on your podcast, Chris. So, but I will link to your podcast and I'll link to your article in the show notes. But as always, it's great to catch up with you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on and sharing your experience in the Peruvian Amazon.
Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Chris Christensen for joining me on the podcast and for sharing such a fascinating insight into the Peruvian Amazon. Now, if the Peruvian Amazon has been sitting in your one day maybe category for you, I hope this episode has shown just how achievable and rewarding it can be. So it's definitely somewhere I am hoping to get to next year. Now, you'll find links to Chris's detailed article about the Peruvian Amazon and his Amateur Traveler podcast in the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com/episode 89. So you can explore this destination further and dive into more of his travel stories. I've also shared some of his amazing photos from that trip as well in the show notes. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure you're following the podcast and consider leaving us a review, please, in your favorite podcast app. It really does help more people find the show. And who knows, one day I might be as famous as Chris. Now, as always, thanks so much for listening. And until next time, happy global travel planning. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Global Travel Planning Podcast. For more details and links to everything we discussed today, check out the show notes at globaltravelplanning.com. Remember, if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app, because your feedback helps us reach more travel enthusiasts just like you. Anyway, that leaves me to say, as always, happy global travel planning.